Cassette Jones starts knocking on the table as Kartel is DJing. And I'm just sitting there like, yo, I'm sitting here in this room doing this. We just did this whole thing. And like that type of like spontaneous collaboration to this day, that's one of my favorite pieces of recorded Vybz Kartel, period, in the history of the 100 million Vybz Kartel songs that exist.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Muscle, and this is another Two Line Music Hut's Entertainment Report podcast. And as I promised, this guest here, we spoke to him in depth about the first part of his career, which was a lot of hip-hop and R&B stuff. But now we're going to get into the more reggae, dancehall, and Caribbean vibes that he's done for the past 25 years. You know, we have back in the building today, we have Mr. Max Glazer from Federation Sound in the building. What's going on, big boss?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Part one was such a great conversation. I'm honored that people that people actually watched it, and you've invited me back for a part two, man. I really appreciate it, and I appreciated the conversation. So I'm looking forward to it.
No, definitely 100%. Because as I said, I've learned so much in the part one, and that was just a little tiny introduction of what you've done. And then now in the part two, at least we could expand into your reggae, dancehall, Caribbean vibes and see what you've done the past 25 years, because Federation was founded in 1999. Now it's 2024. So yeah, 25 years on the ground, up and gunning.
Yeah, we're celebrating 25 years this year. It sounds and seems crazy, but there's been there's a lot of overlap, especially from like 99 into the mid and late 2000s, kind of the stuff we talked about last time, and like my former hip hop and R&B life, there was a lot of overlap, but it's been an interesting ride, and really, the reggae and dancehall and Caribbean music is, like I kind of chose that path. Like I always had a love for it early on, but once we kind of started Federation, and moving more and more and more in that direction, that just kind of like pulled me in all the way. And it's been, as you said, 25 years of dancehall and reggae.
Yeah, no, crazy right there. So then, okay, let's just jump into the beginning of Federation, because how you described it to me, Federation isn't like a traditional sound crew or sound. It's more of a collective. So how did Federation start in the first place, and who was involved in the beginning stages of Federation?
Yeah, so as we just said, the sound itself was founded in 1999, and there's a backstory of a few years prior to that, that again overlaps into this hip hop world, that I had come to live in, that leads up to 99, where we actually started Federation. And so, we had been, Cipha Sounds, who was at the time and still is one of my best friends, an amazing DJ in his own right in the late 90s. He was kind of, really just getting his feet wet. He wasn't, I don't believe, on the radio. I mean, at this point that I'm talking about, he definitely wasn't on the radio. He was working with Flex, so he was with Flex everywhere and kind of hustling to get those opening slots. And Cipha and I became friends working in a record store together. We became friends working together at Fat Beats. He would come in and out, and that was how we really got to know each other. And then he worked there. We worked together. And as he was building his thing, I was out DJing. When he had a gig, he would have me come with him to open. And, we kind of just, we always held each other down. And look, this is the days of records. So, each of us has got 4 or 5 crates of records. Well, that means the crew of people rolling with us is like, we got another 6, 7, whoever wants to get into the party free, just like our kind of main core of friends, and then kind of people that added on to that. And so Cipha was a part of the Big Dog Pitbulls at the time, which was early on in that, which Funkmaster Flex had started. And I was separate from that, and kind of the stuff that him and I did together was separate from that. And our crew, again, there was a lot of overlap, but like our crew didn't really have a way to identify itself. It was just like, oh, this is Max and Cypher's people. Oh, that's Max's people. Oh, that's Cypher's people, or whatever. But like if he was with Flex, like, oh, that's the Big Dog Pitbulls. And so Cipha came up with Federation, just Federation, as the name for our crew. Like I need something. This was him. He was like, yo, I need something that so I can shout out our crew, like that identifies us. You, me, Ari, Kiko, the next three guys carrying the records, and all of that, you know, because it was always a lot of us. It was always a squad of us. And he said, yo, let's use Federation. And where he got it from is from Star Trek. Cypher's a big Star Trek nerd. He's a big TV nerd, period. But he always loved Star Trek. And so that was just like, he came with that. I wasn't like, yo, we got to come up with the thing. He just came up with that and was like, yo. And again, like it's from Star Trek Federation. It's a collective. Like it makes sense. We're not just throwing a name on it. Like, yeah, no, it's very, as Spock would say, logical. It's very logical. And it makes sense. So Federation became our crew, me, Cipha, and our kind of immediate world of people. I can't tell you exactly what year that was, but it was definitely prior to 99 because we were using that. And so the way the sound comes to be is Kenny Mees, my partner who I founded Federation with. The founders were myself, Kenny Mees, and Cipha Sounds. And Kenny was grew up in Philly and lived in Philly. And my roommate at the time and a lot of my friends and people in hip hop that I've been working with were in Philly or had come to New York from Philly. And a lot of them were graffiti writers. And Kenny was like a super all city graffiti writer. And had been since he was like in his teens, you know, also like one of these guys that's like known for his polo gear from back, you know, everyone thinks of like New York and the lowlifes and Brooklyn and that scene, which is really like the foundation of it. But also Philly had that. And Kenny was always dipped and on his fashion and sneakers business from, you know, late 80s, early 90s. And so Kenny was in Philly. My roommate at the time in Brooklyn was a guy who had moved up from Philly. And so I had gotten to know all of these Philly people. And we were working together in different capacities. And Kenny was coming up and we would go to record stores and we would, you know, just be doing music and different types of things. And we were both we were both very similar in having, he was a hip hop DJ and he had been a hip hop DJ and that was what he was known for. But really had this love of reggae also and liked playing reggae and had, you know, we were into it. So him and I kind of bonded over that in this, you know, pre-Federation days. And then we would go to record stores and he was working in a record store in Philly. I was working in a record store in New York. And so my roommate at the time, who had been my best friend, him and I were kind of like drifting apart. He was moving more into dance music, before EDM, house music and dance music, into that world. And we were just kind of just drifting in different directions. And Kenny, who had been his friend, and they were still friends. We were all still friends, but like Kenny and I were kind of moving down this same path.
And this is the reggae and dancehall type of path that you guys are moving down, right?
Yeah. And kind of like moving into that thing where, oh, now you're buying 7 inches, you know, like that's a dividing line for like hip hop DJs. Yeah. It's like, it's in those days, like now you don't have it. Cause it's like, well, you have the music in your computer or you don't, but it was a big dividing line then. And one of my kind of like OGs that really kind of like pushed me in a good way down the path of reggae and dancehall and Jamaican music. You know, one of the first things he said to me when we started talking about, you're into reggae, was like, he said 2 things. One of them was like, oh, like, like, can you identify singers and DJs by voice?
Mm.
And I was like, I never thought of it. I was like, like I could get it. Like, I know Shaba's voice. So if you put a Shaba at this point, this is like early 90s. Like, of course, I know that's Shaba's voice. I know that's Supercat's voice. But if it were like Terror Fabulous, I might not be able to go, oh, that's Terror Fabulous, even though I know Action, and Action was a huge hit. And like with singers, it was harder because I wasn't as into singers. But so he asked me that. And that was a really important question, because I remember it to this day about like, how deep are you into this? And it wasn't in a condescending way. It was like in a like, oh, tell me about how into this you are. And so the other question was like, oh, are you going to Brooklyn and buying 7 inches? So as a hip hop DJ, we would only play 12 inches. So like, and VP would put everything out on 12 inch. But then once you got to a certain point, there were things that hadn't hit 12 inch yet.
100%.
So then it's like, oh, wait, I'm a hip hop DJ. I'm used to these big records and I can cut and scratch them. But then I'm like, yeah, but I love this like, okay, we got to start buying 7 inch. So Kenny and I were both kind of like moving into that world and just getting more and more into reggae. And we were working on stuff together and just kind of like going down that path in a parallel way. And he would be in New York a lot and we'll come out to parties that me and Cipha were doing. And Cipha always liked reggae. Cipha's a Puerto Rican who grew up in the Bronx. You know what I mean? So like he grew up around it. And so we all just had an affinity for it. And either in like late 80, I don't know exact dates, but like either in late 98 or in 99 somewhere, Kenny had been doing his thing in Philly and getting more and more into the world of the Jamaican scene in Philly, which is like North Philly and West Philly. And there's a huge scene there. And so he had started going, or I got linked up with Ja Freedom, which was kind of the main dubplate studio when you still had like a dub cutter and like artists you only got dubs at the dub studio and the artist went. And so we were talking one time and he was like, yo, there's 2 artists. I think he was like, Junior Reed's going to be in the studio. Like, yo, like you want to go in and voice Junior Reed. But for us, because Kenny always worked on MPCs and stuff like that. And we had these like digital multi-track recorders or whatever. So the idea of remixing, like Kenny's known as a remix guy, but he always was into that from then. So in that case, there was no federation yet, but I was like, I'll go in, I'll put in $150 like to get Junior Reed One Blood. But the purpose being to be able to record it on a different rhythm so we could play it on a different rhythm. The main purpose, so we would have the acapella and he could remix it. Mm-hmm. So we spent the money and voiced Junior Reed without a name. There was no sound name. I think he said our names in the introduction, but there was no sound name. So basically it was just like the tune straight through, but we had access to the acapella. And I think we probably voiced it on, I don't even remember. Maybe it was Slangting, whatever it was. But so we had it split. So we had the acapella and he could do cool stuff with it and remix it. We did the same thing again, maybe a month later, Mr. Easy was in the studio. And I think we just voiced like, this is around that time. We voiced a couple of dubs, maybe one on Showtime with no sound name. And again, we're spending money. And so it came back around that I think it was Capleton. It had to be Capleton was going to be in Ja Freedom's studio in Philly. So I wasn't going to dub studio. I wasn't out at Don Juan. I wasn't going to dub studios in Brooklyn. Like I was not doing this at that point. And so Capleton was going to be in the studio in Philly. And Kenny is like, yo, Capleton's going to be in the studio. Yo, we've been voicing these dubs, but like, yo, I think we should have a name. Like it should be something we can call it. And he was like, what do you think about using Federation? because that's already your crew. That's already the crew. Like if you're any of our friends, you come to the club with us on that night, you're part of Federation. You know what I'm saying? Aside from like the 6 people carrying records. So that was kind of like, that was us. You know what I mean? And he was like, yo, what do you think about using Federation and, you know, like including Cipha in it? Cause that's the thing that you guys kind of started. And I was like, yeah, like, absolutely. I was like, yo, let me talk to Cipha. And Cipha's like, yeah, that sounds cool. Great. I'll get a dubplate with my name in it. Absolutely. And so we went, and so then he voiced Capleton with using Federation sound and the 3 of us. And that's really where Federation was born. You know, it wasn't like we didn't sit down at a table like, okay, guys, we're starting to sound. Let's do this. Let's do that. And, you know, so we started in a very non-traditional way, and I think kind of have existed throughout as, you know, a somewhat non-traditional sound. Like, you know, if you want to get super technical, and again, this isn't super technical, like I'll be the first to say it, like we don't have a physical sound. So
you know, I knew for some strange reason you were going to say that 100%.
Well, that's a thing that like right now isn't really that's not a part of even the conversation. But when we started, and for many years, like there would be a good argument that like you're not a sound unless you have a sound. That's what a sound, you know, that's what a sound is. And then there's sort of like the a disco. So if you're a disco, people might kind of more identified that as, well, that's okay, that's the DJs. Where or just like used it differently. Like I first knew using that term in terms of Renaissance, because Renaissance was Renaissance disco.
Yes.
And Renaissance had a sound. They had a truck. They had a sponsored truck. You know what I'm saying? So like all of those things that in Jamaica, like you had to have a truck. You had to have the storage. You had the squad of people that moved the boxes. You know, so we were never a sound in, you know, in that
traditional dance hall reggae type of style of sound.
Right. And also, you know, for most of the life of it, Kenny and I were based in different cities. He lived in New York for a few years, but like I'm in New York, Kenny's in Philly. We were individually our own DJs that had been building names the same way Cipha was, even though Cipha and I were in New York. He very much had his own thing. He was a part of the Pitbulls. I very much had my own thing as a DJ, and Kenny also very much had his own thing as a DJ. So as you put it, like not intentionally, but it sort of started and kind of moved through its existence as like a collective is probably the most accurate way to describe the group of people. But I also feel like sound, you know, a sound, like we're a sound for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's accurate. Someone could argue with me. And I'd be happy to have that conversation. But so that was how it started. And so it was like, you know, the 3 of us individually doing our own things and then coming together. And Kenny and I were really mostly, then it's like, okay, we started working on, you know, we did a series. The first mixtapes were Federation 1, 2, and 3, because we're coming from a hip hop background. So doing a mixtapes is like a very obvious part of what you're supposed to do.
That's your calling card. It's like, this is how people are going to know that you're around. And as you said, coming from hip hop, that's what you do. So why wouldn't you apply the same thing now to a reggae and dancehall type of thing?
Yeah, and people were doing reggae mixtapes for sure, but also the more popular transfer of music hand to hand and overseas internationally was, you know, live dances. You know, that was more. You had much less live hip hop recordings. You had people doing mixtapes, and in dancehall, much more of it was dances and clashes that would hit a CD and then they would circulate. There were people doing reggae mixtapes, absolutely first. And so Kenny and I were really sitting and working on mixtapes. So we did a series that was like Federation. It was just called Federation 1 was the first one. Federation 1, Federation 2, Federation 3. That ended up being, 1 through 5 eventually. And so like in terms of that was just Kenny and I. And that and Cipha's name is in some of those dubs, and some of them they're not as we get into later years. And Cipha was doing his own thing. Eventually, after a few years, there was a situation with Flex where basically Cipha was kind of given an ultimatum of like, yo, like you're either a pit bull or you're something else, but you're not both. And Cipha, like that was Cipha's that was where he made all of his living and all of his work. And we kind of all just said like, yeah, of course, like you got to do what you got to do. Like it never changed any kind of personal relationship or any kind of friendship. But the technical point of, okay, at that point, Cipha can't be a part of Federation, the sound, but it was still also our crew, but it became a thing where it was like, yo, like you're this or you're that. And because as he was kind of moving up through the ranks of the other world that he was in, and getting his feet wet on the radio and stuff, that situation kind of came about. And so then technically Cipha's not in the sound anymore. Although, as I said, remain the same level of best friends constantly all the way through. So he's doing his thing. And then at that point, it's me and Kenny working. And that was pretty early on. That was probably like a couple of years, maybe even in the first year or two. Because when we get to some of the other stuff that we'll talk about, like, like you don't hear him shout it out in that. But if you hear me juggling on like a certain night, like certainly if I play that first set of Capleton dubs we ever voiced in 99, you'll hear Cipha's name in them. And there are other dubs kind of voiced from that first year that you'll hear his name in them.
In there. You talked about, okay, so then let's skip a couple years because you brought it up. Mixtapes. You've done a series of mixtapes as Federation that's been popular right throughout the globe. I would think one of your I'm going to skip to the most obvious and then we're going to go backwards. One of your most obvious popular tapes is the Vybz Kartel, the two Cartel that you guys had put out there. All right. Yeah, but I know before you even got to Cartel, we're going to bring up this name again, Mr. Morgan. And there was another name that you had brought up in the first part was Jackie Juice Him. How did they lead you to that whole Vybz Kartel situation?
Well, so Jackie Juicem and Mr. Morgan were both working in different capacities at Greensleeves Records at the time. And Cartel had, like, in sort of as this is kind of getting ready to happen, had been in talks with them and then ended up signing to Greensleeves through Don Corleone, through Vendetta. Or where, I don't remember if it was Vendetta, it was his Don Corleone label at the time. So Cartel through Don ended up signing to Greensleeves. And I believe Morgan was, doing what he was doing at the time, which was promotions, working records, working songs, working artists. And Jackie was working as a consultant because Jackie was someone, even to this day, like, that introduced me to, most of the people that are my initial kind of like real links into dancehall. Not every single one. There are some other key people, but like Jackie introduced me to Jeremy Harding and Sean Paul in, wow, this is pre-Federation, 97 or 98 when Infiltrate was out. Sean came to New York. He probably had to Infiltrate on a Strictly the Best compilation and was like, "Oh, Max, like you need to meet Jeremy, and link me with Jeremy." Jackie's the one that introduced me to Sham and Dave Kelly and Janet Davidson, who's Dave and Sham's partner in Madhouse. You know what I mean? Like, that list could go on and on and on. I probably couldn't even in 2 hours alone, kind of impress upon people the importance that she's played, in my life in reggae, but also just in a lot of things in reggae and dancehall. And so Jackie was there as a consultant, and between them, I believe it was kind of Jackie and the idea of like, oh, you guys have been doing these mixtapes. Jackie's American, so she grew up, in New York. Mr. Morgan is obviously Canadian, and so you guys have been doing these mixtapes. Like Kartel is signed to Greensleeves, and like, probably it would be really cool if you guys did a mixtape. Like, they're working on the album. And again, this was in the era of like, that was a very standard thing in hip hop, and in the major label hip hop system was like, people would use a mixtape to get signed, or if someone was signed, you would put out a mixtape to kind of like get the streets bubbling. And then off of that momentum, then you release your single. Then you do your album. So it was like a very standard kind of way of marketing and launching, newer artists.
Especially from a hip hop standpoint, not really a dancehall standpoint.
There was no real precedent from a dancehall standpoint. At that point, dancehall, I'm not talking about reggae albums of like the 70s so much, but when we're moving into dancehall, like the idea, a dancehall album was, a compilation of all of your hits from the last year and a half that were on 7-inch, put onto an LP and a CD, so people could buy them in that format. But essentially, the album has never been in the dancehall era, the primary format that exposed music. You know what I mean? You had to go to a dance, you had to listen to a dance, get into mixtapes, that culture, that's more the culture of dancehall for sure. If we're talking about 90s and 2000s. So she had the idea, and kind of just made the link, and was like, yo, this is something we should do. And they said it's a Kartel, and we set up a thing. I think, I don't know, maybe Greensleeves paid for the plane ticket or something, like maybe something like that. Like Greensleeves paid for the plane ticket, and I was like, all right, cool. This sounds great. Like Kartel was definitely already bubbling, and like we knew he was dope. But again, it was 2003, so it was early on. It was before that first album. And so, so I just flew to Jamaica. I had met him. Yeah, I had to have met him before. And I don't remember this for sure. But basically, I flew to Jamaica, and he had sent his boy Cell Block to pick me up at the airport. And you'll hear Cell Block shouted out in a bunch of the songs from that era. And I've been going to Jamaica maybe for 2 years at this point, but I'm going once a year. So this is maybe like my third, maybe fourth trip. So I don't really know my way around. I know some people, but we've just been learning this stuff. And so, so Cell Block picks me up, and we drive into Portmore and pull into a driveway, pull into a house. We go into a house, and we're in like a decent sized room, and it's Vybz Kartel and Cassette Jones. And Cassette Jones, who I had never met, but obviously is the legendary Cassette Jones. You know what I'm saying? So again, as just like a kid kind of learning about this stuff and coming from foreign, like that's like, wow, this is a big, like, you know, like Cassette Jones might have been a more worldwide known name than Vybz Kartel at that point.
Okay, you know what? You might have a point at that time because he's a cassette man. So on every cassette, that's who you hear, and Cartel is just getting his. Yes, he might have had like the Tech Buddy and those songs are out already, but it still wasn't that superstar Cartel.
We could do the timeline. I don't think Tech Buddy was out then.
Okay.
I think this is before, at least when we started working on it. I think this is before Tech Buddy. I think Tech Buddy comes after we did this whole mixtape, to be honest with you. I would have to do some research. But I think it comes after, because I'll jump out of timeline, because on the second mix, Time Served, we voiced Tech Buddy, Picture This, on dancehall rock rhythm. So I think that's the timeline. I think Tech Buddy comes after it, and that was like a Jazzy T Delano. That was a Renaissance production. Yep. So I think that comes. So even to show you the levels, that Cartel's not even at that level yet. This is in a McCall Kanai with a buckle of tall Kanai, Tough a Lie, first set of Cartel tunes that were coming out of Don Corleone's studio. That was the era that we really kind of started in with the first mix, because like I said, it was before the first album. This was pre albums Up to the Time. So this is before Up to the Time came out.
Because this one, the first mix was called From Time to Time. So yeah, you guys are still playing within the time, because you know this is what the album is going to be, something to do with time. So then you guys stayed within that time frame there.
Well, because but that comes from him being the time minister, and that was, you know, which also became the crime minister. But so the time thing was from that point. That was a thing for him, and I don't really know the history of that or where that kind of first, but that was his lead in, you know, his ad lib, Up to the Time, you know, so that I believe is where sort of the time piece of that comes from, and he chose to use that throughout. You know, because it was like it was really Up to the Time, and then that becomes the name of the album. And then when we're talking about the mixtape, you know, I don't know which. I mean, we couldn't have named it until afterward. And he does some lines in there that goes, you know, from time to time. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, time was definitely the Cartel thing.
Yeah, so that was in his mind. I don't know where that came from, but that was that era. But it was before the album was called Up to the Time. That was his ad lib, and it appeared a bunch in the things that he was saying on the mix. And so I think we, you know, after the fact, we just settled on like, oh yeah, this should be From Time to Time. Because he had a few references of that in there. And so we just sat down, and I had, you know, CDs of rhythms that I wanted to use. And I had never sat in the studio with him. I had never worked with him. Like I said, I'm sure I had met him, but I don't know how he works. I don't know how he voices. I don't know, you know, some people, I want to voice on this. I don't want to voice on that, or do whatever. And so I gave the CD to Jones. He loaded everything up. He was recording on like a Roland VS 880 or a 1680. So it's like a internal self-contained digital recorder. And it's a typical like Jamaican house room. It's like, you know, these like hard ceramic tiles, all concrete walls, all the surfaces are hard. It's like the worst environment you could think of for like for studio and for sound.
Yeah.
But it just didn't matter. So we loaded everything up, and I don't know what he's going to want to do this. He's not going to want to do that. And Kenny and I kind of gone through and been like, yo, we've got a bunch of ideas. So we kind of had a lot of rhythms, some dancehall rhythms, some kind of original stuff, some original foundation rhythms, a good amount of hip hop stuff, because I thought it would be, like, again, early in this, in the career of where we were, like, I was still fully immersed in hip hop world, doing big parties and all of that stuff. But also now fully immersed in dancehall world, and wanting to kind of look, the idea, and a big idea for me has always been wanting to help bring more people into the dancehall and reggae world. Mm-hmm. But in a way where the music is legit, is authentic, is not not trying to do a thing that's like, oh, this is a crossover. But mm-hmm. the idea of combining some real street shit when it came to hip hop, the idea of mixtapes, the type of things that an artist would do on mixtape that you wouldn't do for your album. You would do a song with a big hook and some more melody for your album, but on a mixtape, you would get the rappers rapping.
Yeah.
And so that was some of the idea that we brought to this, that we kind of, Kenny and I put together. And then we're here in this room, and I really don't have any idea, because it wasn't really like a back and forth with him about what we were going to do. Mm-hmm. It was just like, oh, I hope this dude shows up when I get there. Was actually probably like the biggest thought that I had, was like, yo, I hope I don't get to Kingston and end up spending 5 days just waiting around and we don't get anything done. Because it's a very real possibility.
1,000%.
With it, not even just with him, with anybody. It's just
1,000%.
Mm-hmm. Island time. And so we're there, and we just, I said, okay, like, I got these beats, like, what, I'd love to record something on this. And the first thing we recorded and the first thing we threw on mm-hmm. was, it ended up being the first thing on that mixtape, which I think was a bootleg Tupac 50 Cent record.
Yes.
And it was just like a real simple, dark hip hop beat. And my idea for it, like the way it appears on the mix, was this idea that I had. But again, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be like, okay, here's what I want you to do. Like, if I was going to be able to produce in that capacity, or it was going to be like, run the rhythm, here's a thing, or just like,
is he going to just give me what he wants, or can I kind of have my input to make it the way that I want it to be?
Right. So we started out, and so we throw that beat on, starts DJing different things, and I was like, okay, like, here's what I want to do. Like, I want to DJ. I want you to DJ something, mm-hmm. but then in the mix, I'm going to pull it up. So I'm going to go, so you go, I want you to go like level, yo, hold on. And I had to explain this. So like, I'm like, all right, but in the mix, I'm going to bring the beat down back there. And then I want you to do some kind of talk. We'll talk, and then you're going to come in with another tune. Almost like the way you would, I think I described it like the way you might on a stage show. There's just a rhythm juggling, and you might give a talk that leads into your girl tune. And then you might go level and give a talk that leads into a weed tune, and then go level and give a talk that leads into another tune. So like the concept of that, and combining it with this hip hop beat. And so we did that. And I think that first thing is like 4 or 5 tunes. And it's like all of these like Badman tunes that he had been doing on dub. Ring dong, ding dong, boy head swell. Yes. Just a bunch like that era. So like Kartel fans knew those, like knew those. So I was like, all right, this is going to catch people. And so we did it, and we built it back in that way. And so he's just like, yeah, whatever, like wheels off another one. And it, and so then we kind of do the talks, and he's like, one of the things is like, yo, Max, what do you think about that one? You feel that one? Hold on, let me try something else. And it's just kind of this thing where I don't think I thought of it at the time this way, but it developed into this thing that I feel pretty strongly about, of like, if we're doing a mixtape with someone, I don't just want it to be a bunch of songs. Like, I want the artist's personality to be reflected in it. I want it to be more than just any of the songs, more than just the collection of the songs. Like, I really want it to be a body of work. And with some talking and stuff in there somewhere, so you get another side of their personality type of thing. With some talking, just with some, however you want to do it, with some personality. Because when an artist is being an artist, they're delivering their song. You know what I mean? But you're not getting that like conversational, because I also came from this background, like we talked about in the other part, of interviewing people. So like getting some insight into, or in terms of like dance hall, like a lot of it was like, all right, the way like a selector would introduce this would give us a talk that made this next song connect. It wasn't just like, boom, here's a song, and then you listen to it and you understand what it's about. You're already being brought into it from the selector talking. So that was kind of like the idea. And so we just sat and just, yo, what about this one? Yo, what about this one? What about this one? What about Sling Ting? What about Cuss Cuss? And bro, he just had song after song after song after song. And we just wheeled off basically everything except for maybe one or two things, maybe even everything, in that one sitting with Jones. And then I also had this thing of like, and again, this goes to like, the rappers, like kicking an acapella. That's some rapper shit. Like, okay, hold on. Like, yeah. Okay, we're rocking these songs. Nah. I want you to hear my words. I want you to hear me rap. That was like a different level of like, okay, there's no music. This is just words. So I had this idea of like, yo, like, do you have anything that we can do just as an acapella? Because I want to use this to break up, the different parts of it or whatever. I just kind of had in my mind, knowing what I knew about hip hop and mixtapes and what I loved about dancehall, like just the different elements that I wanted to make up this whole thing that would become the mixtape. We didn't know how they were going to come together or any of that. I just knew I needed him talking. I needed him singing songs. I needed an acapella. And so I was like, all right, so can we do something? And then he starts, it's probably the last thing we do. He goes, Miade, Portmore scheme, vibes machine, end time dashin, play Safi bashin. And yo, he gets through like a few lines of that, and Cassette Jones starts knocking on the table, like as Kartel is DJing. And I'm just sitting there like literally just like mystified and like just losing my, like, yo, I'm sitting here in this room doing this. We just did this whole thing. And like that type of like spontaneous collaboration, and Jones just starts knocking the table, and Kartel just keeps DJing through the thing. And then he says something at the end, and I think I say something at the end, just like far, I don't have a mic or whatever. And it was just like, yo, like to this day, that's one of my favorite, not only one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on or ever recorded, it's one of my favorite pieces of recorded Vybz Kartel, period, in the history of the 100 million Vybz Kartel songs that exist.
That's one of your favorite interaction songs. That right there.
Yeah. And so like having that, we just like, and so then, and I'm just like, you know, my mind is blown. We just sat there for like the whole night, sitting with Vybz Kartel and Cassette Jones recording this. I'm like, wow, this is blowing my mind. And then, because it's in the studio days of 2003, I fly out. I still don't have, or no, I leave the studio and I don't have the recorded stuff. You couldn't like, it would take like an hour to burn a CD off at that time. So I leave, and then maybe a few days later, this is crazy, I get from Cassette Jones this mini disc in my hand is the actual original split track pan left and right recordings of the From Time to Time mixtape in Cassette Jones handwriting.
That's wild, bro.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and now in 2024, I literally, you know, I'm sitting in my studio, like I literally keep this directly in front of my face where I sit at my studio desk, because I don't even believe that it's that. You know what I mean? That's where that comes from. Like that, just as a fan, like that's just my how much I love music and how much I love this. And like that mix, I love as a fan. Like if I didn't even make it, if we didn't even make it, if Federation Sound didn't even physically make that with our own hands, like that's how I listen to that mix.
That's one of those classic, because remember, Kartel was Cassette Jones. He has a Kartel. You guys have. There was a couple Kartels, but definitely there was ones that stood out. And that Federation, especially that first one, boss, holy smokes! When we heard him flowing on the dance hall and then it flipping over to hip hop, and as you said, all the little stuff in between, where it almost seemed like you guys just recorded, say, okay, push record. And then, okay, we'll end 90 minutes later. It didn't seem like you guys were actually in a studio. Okay, we're going to do this. It just seemed like a one long freestyle of crazy vibes.
No, I mean, thank you. That was what I wanted it to feel like. Because if it feels like you're in a studio, then it feels stiff. I wanted it to feel like, I guess, really like what the streets of Jamaica and the streets of New York feel like. And like where those two things meet, like, because that was what Kenny and I were like. That was where what we were trying to figure out in being from a hip hop world and getting more into reggae is like, yo, these things are brothers. Like they're deeply connected, but everyone doesn't necessarily see, hear, or understand that connection. So like what you know. We feel like our role is to try to like bring those connections out and make, you know, just like a pathway for people to get more into the stuff and to get open to it, where someone might be like, that's that Jamaican shit, or someone might be like, I don't listen to this hip hop shit or whatever, to kind of like have a meeting ground, but again, where it's not watered down, where it's not meant to be crossed over. Like it's, you know, it's authentic and it's legitimate. And, you know, at this point, like, look, I could talk for hours about it, as I already have. Like I have a lot of like thoughtful insight on it now, 22 years later, 22 years later. But at the time, it's just what we were doing. It was not in any way this considered. I can reflect on it like this, but at the time, it's literally like, yo, I hope I don't get left standing at the airport. Next, I hope I don't get left sitting in the studio with someone that I've never met before and no artist showing up. And third, like, I hope this dude is open to hearing what I have to say in terms of like the creative part of what we're doing here. And basically being like, you know, not that confident that any of those things were going to happen. I look back and talk about it with confidence now, but, you know, like,
Yeah.
For anyone, Jamaican or not, even more so for a foreigner, like walking into a Jamaican recording studio with dancehall artists is not the most comfortable situation you could be in. It's not designed to be comfortable
At all.
No one is really trying to make you comfortable, and in fact, they might be trying to make you uncomfortable to make sure that you're really supposed to be that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, test you a bit as
you're solid. You're getting the new guy treatment until you're no longer the new guy.
As we go through in hip hop too. It's not totally unique to dancehall, but it can be very intimidating. So in these times, I was very much like, okay, like, and I like, and just trying to figure it out, and you know, and there we go, and now we can look at it 20 some years later, and I'm like, I'm super proud of that mix, like that's a part of the catalog of what Federation has done. I feel like it's an important, you know, like my whole thing, like to represent and do it right and contribute meaningfully. I feel like that's a meaningful contribution to dancehall and to reggae, and you know, that's the most important, meaningful thing to me.
No, for sure. When you look back at it, that's a classic to this day. I'm pretty sure right now we're talking about it. I could guarantee you, somebody is listening to that mixtape somewhere on planet Earth. Guarantee you, off of YouTube or somewhere. Guarantee. It's just that. It was just that impactful. So then listen, that's 03 now. So okay, cool. Came out, did its thing crazy. So then how do you guys connect again in 04 for Time Served now?
So we had the link then, and, you know, like a good relationship. I don't remember when Kartel started coming to New York, so I don't remember if it was in this interim, but like, no, but we had like a real link, and he would come to New York, and he would come to New York, and he would only stay in the Bronx. His people were Bronx. He was like Bronx diehard. It wasn't until years later on Hard Slam Rhythm when I used to tell him, like, bro, like, because I lived in Brooklyn, so we would go get him and we would come to Brooklyn. But again, just like with everything, Federation, like we were in kind of like in the cut in a different part. It wasn't like going to Flatbush and I had a little studio in my apartment. We would go get him and we would come to the apartment and work, do dubs for people. You know, record stuff for Cipha Sounds and for the hip hop DJs that were on the radio. That was one of the big links that I felt like I was always able to be really helpful with. Was I knew all of these hip hop guys, and so any of the guys who were open and into dancehall, we would do drops and dubs for them, and I would do that like with Sean Paul and with Sham. And, you know, cut them on plates. Like we would do them, go to Don Juan, cut them on plates. We took Baby Sham plates, physical plates, to the tunnel so Sham could give them to Flex in the tunnel. And so that was one of those roles that, because of like the kind of multiple worlds that I lived in, you know, all of the Hot 97 guys, especially, like I knew really well. And so with Kartel, like he would come by the house and we would do that stuff. We'll go link him on shows. Like this is probably after the second mix when he could fly out. Like I would go DJ for him. You know what I mean? Like we would go do shows, and so so the link was there, and I think most of that stuff probably comes after the second mix. But so then we're going to Jamaica, like we do the mix, and you know it was that was one of those mixes that, you know, at that time it was CDs and you know, radio in Jamaica has always been very important and very powerful. But when you get to a certain level of street music, like there was a lot of stuff. It wasn't like you know, in New York or Toronto, like a rap record, but you just bleep the curses and of course you can play it. So as long as the curses aren't there, there's a lot of stuff that couldn't play on the radio. There wasn't able to be a clean version of it. So, and again, like we talked about earlier, like the culture of dancehall is really like the streets. And when it came to like recorded music, Taxi Man, Bus Man, Cars. And so like I started getting calls and reports of like, I'm hearing this Vybz Kartel CD everywhere, every bus, every town bus, every country bus. And that was like a big deal to like a crew from New York. You know what I mean? Because he was continuing to build and build and build. And it was just like, it was everywhere in the streets of Jamaica. And so I think so one, kind of like the mutual respect was established there. I think if we had made a flop, we probably wouldn't have had a continuing relationship. But we made, you know, between Federation and Cartel, we made something really dope that clearly had an impact on the culture and the streets of Jamaica and dancehall music worldwide. And so we had the link and we kept the link, and you know, we had talked about working on the next thing, and as he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he's on Sting that year. And so at that point we usually go to Jamaica kind of right after Christmas. So he's on Sting, and that's the year, what year is that? Is that 2004, right? Where him and Ninja clashed.
They clash either end 03 or end 04, because Sting is always December right at the end.
So it was 03. So it was 03. Yeah. So it was 03 going into 04. And so they have that clash. We all saw what happened, physical altercation. And then shortly after that, Cartel ends up getting arrested and spends, I don't know if it was a week, if it was a couple weeks, if it was a little more than that. It was more than a couple days locked up. And so I'm like, shit, this is crazy. Like, wow, this is really crazy. And so then we were back down in Jamaica, and either maybe like right before I got down there, he had gotten out, but was nowhere to be seen. No parties, no dances, no nothing. They were on some like Taliban hideout levels on the low. And so we always used to stay at there was a Hilton right in New Kingston on Knutsford Boulevard. It's kind of just like the main strips, right down the block from Asylum, and years later from Quad. It's this one little strip where there's a couple of hotels that at that time was really like New Kingston. That was kind of like where any business travelers would stay, and banks were and stuff. And so there was a restaurant that was like a Jamaican sports bar directly next to Asylum called Jamrock, which had been there for years. I believe years before that, it was a nightclub, but that's before my time. Someone else will have to tell that story. And so that was where we would go. We would just walk up there and sit down, get some food or whatever. Be by the hotel. Hotel was kind of the base. And been trying to link Cartel, whatever. So we linked and was like, yo, like we're over at the Hilton. And so somehow we came to this thing that was like, all right, like I'll come link you at Jamrock. Like, all right. So we're over at Jamrock, sitting down kind of like in the back. And I'm like, he's probably not going to show up, whatever. I'm just like eating some food or whatever. And him, like the Sting clash and then him getting arrested was like national news in Jamaica. It was a big,
for sure. Big, huge.
And it had just happened. And we're kind of sitting in the back, and in through the restaurant walks Kartel and like a big squad, probably like a dozen people. And people are like, yo, like it was a shock to see him out. You know what I mean? This is like a restaurant full of people. And he had just gotten out and we sat down and was like, yo, mixtape again. And so that was kind of where that was the foundation of Time Served, but it's also where the name Time Served comes from, because now we're like, well, time something is everything. We did From Time to Time. The album is up to the time.
Up to the time.
He's the time minister, and that's his thing. And I don't remember who said it, but he probably said it because he's obviously very quick with the words. It was like, yo, and so we called it Time. So we came up with the idea to call it Time Served. And
crazy.
And you know, and there we go. But we also already had this formula of like I knew what he could do, and he trusted me and Kenny in what we do and in like beat selection and putting it together. You know, like he never heard the first mix until it was out on the streets. He voiced it in the bag, done. And then it took over the place. And so he obviously trusted in us, what that we knew our part of it. And so that's where like the mutual respect and the relationship came in. And so, man, this part might be this part 2 of the interview might be 3 hours, because I just like you can cut me off at any time. I love talking about this stuff, man. And
no, because it's an amazing part where, again, we always hear the end product, but it's how you got to the end product is always the most, to me, is always the most interesting. Yeah, we know it's done. Yeah, Time Served, From Time to Time, cool. But how did you get there? That's always in my thought there. So Time Served was recorded in the States, or you guys went back to Jones again and recorded Time Served?
No, Time Served. At that point, I don't think he could fly out for sure because of the court stuff. No, so I don't know if it was that trip or we planned a next trip to come down. But he was laying very low. He had an apartment in Kingston. So he wasn't in Portmore. It was like an apartment in an apartment complex. We're not talking about like baller mansions, house in the hills. Like, he had an apartment in an apartment complex. I took a cab over there, hopped out of the cab, called him, the gate buzz it again. Like, I'm like, I don't know where, if they, you know, like, I don't know how well this is going to work out. And so we go sit down in the apartment, and there's maybe, I don't even think there was maybe one person there. And so there's like no entourage. It's like I walk in, I have my Pro Tools, I have everything in the bag. And he's like, yo, you can record right here. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'd rather not. Like, I'd rather like record in a studio and like do it. Yeah. I know my Pro Tools stuff, but it's also like, it's a lot going on. But when I walked in, we were in the living room, and from the bedroom, there was music blasting, and it was just a rhythm on repeat. It was a rhythm on repeat, looped, just playing. And I was like, we're talking, but I was like, yo, what is this? I was like, this is sick. It's dance hall rock rhythm. And so remember what that sounded like to you when it came out and how crazy it sounded?
Of course. It was a hard rhythm.
And super fast. And so no songs had even been recorded on it. And it wasn't like I got it on a juggling. I just walk into this apartment and this rhythm is blasting. And I'm like, yo, what is this? It was also, to get into some real nerd shit, it was also 5 BPM faster and had more melody in it. So it wasn't quite as stripped down. And he was like, oh, who built Dancehall Rock? It was Birch?
I don't know.
Or Scada. It was one of them.
Do it if you're bad. One of the two of them.
It was one of them. And he was like, yo, it's so-and-so's rhythm. Da, 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 da. And I was like, yo, can we use this on the mixtape? And he was like, Sure. And so I finally convinced, I was like, look, I'd really like to work in a studio and just be able to like sit down and work. And again, he wasn't really going most places then, but one of the places he was going and where he was doing all of his dub work was a studio called Vertex.
Yes, that's what X-Ray.
Ray, exactly. X-Ray. And I had never met Ray. And so Kartel's like, oh, hold on, let me see. He gets on the phone and not in quite as polite language as I'll use, but he was like, yo, Ray, I'm coming to the studio. I need to record a bunch of stuff. I go, okay. And so we jump in the car and we go to Vertex. And so I've got my hard drives, I've got my computer, I got my thing, I got my this, that, and the other thing. But there's a vocal booth and there's a little board. There's a little digi design board. And Kartel's like, yo, I need the studio. And it's just a one voicing room studio or whatever. And so I go and I'm like, all right, cool. We're using this studio. I was like, I'm plugging my hard drive in and recording. I was like, I'm not leaving anyone else to send me these files. And they're like, what do you mean? You can record it right on the thing. And I was like, I'm walking with this today. And so we recorded a bunch of stuff for the mix that day. But not everything. Like this one was a little more of an extended process. And then I think we recorded some of the stuff up in New York and we kind of just went back and forth, put that one together. You know, one of the ideas was like, look, like, yo, like the thing is called Time Served. Like, let's address the altercation with Ninja Man at Sting. And I was like, and again, just thinking of ways to kind of like make mixtapes interesting and do skits and just do different things. I grabbed the audio of the actual incident on stage at Sting, and I said to him, and it was one of these things where, like, again, he very much just like trusted us, because I was like, look, I'm gonna splice this up with the different parts of what's happening, but I want you to narrate it. But we didn't sit down and do it together. So I just was like, okay, I need you to talk about this. I need you to talk about this. And then I need you to talk about this. If you go back and listen to it, he sort of like intros it. Then you hear a piece of it. Then he talks about it. Then you hear another piece of it. And it's a really crazy piece of audio because they're fighting with the microphones. So you hear all this thump, whack, boom, like microphones hitting the ground, microphones hitting people. So there's like the microphone goes and like all of that, but he's narrating it. And so we kind of go through that. And then I don't even remember what we played afterwards, but to make, again, to my point earlier, to make the mixtape have a narrative, make it have a story, make it tell a story, and make it be way more than just the sum of its parts. Make it be its own thing.
No, that's big right there, because again, it's how you're thinking. You want it to be more than just tracks. You want it to be it's almost like an audio movie, an audio mini series that you're trying to create, so then they could envision this when they're listening to this mixtape right here.
Well, I always wanted, even from before doing artist mixtapes, one of the things that Kenny and I really like believed strongly in was we want people to like, we were not ever going to be the guys that put out a mixtape super fast with all the new music, because there's already other people doing that. Other people have that lane down. So we decided we want to make things that you can listen back to 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 20 years later. Again, we didn't think 20 years later at that point, but we did think like, we want to make things that you can listen back to, that you can live with. And then when it comes to working with an artist, like now we're doing an original body of work, the way, you know, like I described kind of how we thought about those things to you, that we're putting all this work, this artist is putting in all this work, and they're trusting in what we're going to do. We want to make something that can last. That's going to be a piece of not only our catalog, but of this artist's catalog, you know, and that was, again, that wasn't an idea that was there in 2003, 2004, but it was how we ended up doing it. And it was an idea that we very much carried intentionally with us in the future, working with other artists, knowing the impact that these things can have, and also the amount of work that we spend on them is like months and back and forth, and, you know, like tens and hundreds of hours. Like, it's not a quick thing. And we also always felt like, look, if we're going to put in this much work, this should be something worthy of that work. And if it's something you're going to listen to 2 times and then put down, what's the point of us putting in all this time and effort? Let's make something that can last as long as possible and live as long as possible.
Makes sense. And remember, this time too, this was the Black Chinese era this time too. So if you're putting out these mixes, you got to come good. If you got that standard was set here. And as you said earlier, Kenny, he liked the remixing and acapella and stuff. So then, hey, Black Chinese here, we could do this too. So everybody's just trying to put out the highest level of mixtapes possible as they can at that point there.
Yeah, when it came to mixtapes, like outside of the artist things, like when it came to mixtapes, yeah, it was like Black Chinese doing like the highest of level things, and Copper Shot mixtapes,
yes,
in those times were, and specifically the ones that I really remember that stick out for me was there was a couple of like Copper Shot culture mixes that really like encapsulated that era of things, and certainly there were other people doing them, but in terms of like when we talk about like mixtape culture outside of like dance and live show, you know, those are the people that we always felt like were incredible, but also like we're not them. We don't want to do the same thing that they do. We want to do what we do and do the thing that we've been building and developing. And just to jump back a little bit in the timeline, there's one really important thing that I want to say about Kartel, Portmore, and the mixes that we did, because our mix from time to time was not the first Vybz Kartel mixtape. And there's important stuff before that led up to that allowed us to be able to do that and helped build up Kartel to where we all ended up connecting, the story that I told earlier. And Cassette Jones as Portmore guy, you know what I'm saying? And Kartel even tells a story about him and Cassette Jones riding the bus together on the first Kartel CD. You know what I mean? When we kind of talk about Portmore and we're, you know, about wanting to get this personality and this stuff. I didn't know that at the time. I knew who Cassette Jones was from afar, but I didn't know that about their link. And so Cassette Jones had done a series, and, you know, it's interesting because they weren't mixed. So they kind of fall into a different category of CDs with Kartel. And if somebody can find them online, send me a link, because I cannot find them online anywhere. But there's a set of them. There's one called 7 Wise Virgins.
Yeah. Either I've heard of it or I have the one, because at this time we were selling CDs and DVDs. So yes, I remember that one there.
There's one called Seven Wise Virgins. I think there's one called uptothetime.com. And there's at least one more because I have them somewhere on CD. And there may be even more than that. And these were basically like, it was just Lyrics Fest. It was Kartel on rhythms. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't even know about these when we sat down and did that first mix. So I've only, like, you know, I learned about them shortly after, but getting to know those guys. But like, I hadn't even gotten those in New York. Like, I hadn't gotten my hands on those. But that was part of what was building him up in the streets of Jamaica. And same time, probably from before, but same time as that first mix, you'll remember this, Cash Money CDs.
Boss, you took the words out of my mouth just now, boss.
I hate to
that would be impossible.
I hate to do your job for you and ask myself questions. Cash Money and Scratchy B. Cash Money and Scratchy B. As another Portmore sound. Now, I don't know the actual facts of this. Scratchy B was described to me as Kartel's brother. So whether that was his blood brother or not, from those days, they were brothers. And no sound, nobody, no how, nowhere had more Kartel than Cash Money.
At all, boss.
None at all. And Scratchy B was the man behind Cash Money. So it's super important, again, in paying respect to the legacy and the history and wanting to add what I can add, what Federation can add, what we can add. It's super important to make sure that we give credit to, but also we're a lot of years out from that now. And I feel like there's a lot of people that don't know about some of this earlier stuff. And Cassette Jones with Vybz Kartel and Cash Money and Scratchy B with Vybz Kartel. Without that, there's no Federation sound in Vybz Kartel. We're done with Kartel. What's next?
So what's next? If we're going to stay in that zone, let's go to Aidonia.
Bro, like I doing that mix was when I personally discovered how incredible of an artist Aidonia is and always was. Because Aidonia had like the most streets level of the streets locked. And I would liken it to like the people who like checked for, in the rap world, like the rapping rappers, like the people who could rap the best, you know, like someone like Cannabis, who wasn't necessarily like known by everyone or the biggest. It wasn't necessarily like have all the hits that you could play in a party. And so like Aidonia was locking the streets like wickedly. And I was a fan. I liked his music, but I wasn't so deep into it. But that really came about probably, the initial link for that was probably happened on dancehallreggae.com.
Okay.
Jerry Digital, linked and was like, yo, and that was like JOP family, and was like, yo, it would be dope for Federation to do something with Aidonia. And I think, oh man, I think I might even have people confused, and I apologize to the people if I'm mixing this all together so many years down the line. But on dancehallreggae.com, it was Ras Jemus was who it was the handle. And so that was the link. And then at that time, really like the biggest kind of overall Aidonia song was 100 Stab. And that was an Equinox production. So that was Gavin and Coffee and the Equinox crew. So that was this is how I met them. And actually probably might have met them through Tifa, because Tifa did a lot of work there. So I think we had I think we had the link. This was the first time we really worked there. I think we worked in the studio before, in Vineyard Town, in the tiny little studio that's their same studio, and made the link and was like, yo, we should all do an Aidonia mix. And so Kenny and I went down. One of my best friends, Matt Goyas, him and I had a project where we were putting out music and doing other stuff, like not specifically dancehall related, just everything, called Business Class. And so if you'll notice on the cover of that, the Bolt Action mix, it's Federation, Equinox, and Business Class present. And so Matt was a big part of that. And I think Business Class funded some of possibly that whole trip to go down and do that. And I didn't know Aidonia. I don't think I probably hadn't even met him. Kenny might have met him. I'm pretty sure I hadn't. And so, but we knew the Equinox guys a bit. And we went, it was like, okay, great. Here's the days we're going to be here. Here's the days we're going to be in the studio. Now we get into typical fashion of, like I had the experience with Kartel was too easy. The hard part was the second time we wanted to make a mixtape, he was locked up in jail. Wow. And so we have this time set. We're down in the studio with Equinox. No Aidonia. Doesn't show up.
What?
So I'm like, oh man, we're like around Kingston. We're doing other stuff. It's like whatever. But like the mission of this trip was to get this Aidonia mix done. And then maybe like the next day he calls and is like, oh, we got to go to, country and do a show, whatever. So then there's nothing. And I, being a little stubborn and a little impatient in my younger age, oh man, like we're hanging out at the Hilton in Kingston. There's a big, I don't know if you know about, but I think it was Tuesdays. The whole of Kingston would come poolside at the Hilton. They would do karaoke.
Okay.
Hundreds of people. Like it was, yeah. Ask somebody about karaoke at the Hilton back in the days. And if they were there, they'd be like, oh yes.
Yeah.
So we're there. It's like Kingston Fashion Week. There's pretty girls. We're hanging out. It's by the pool, whatever. And like, I just was like, yo, like, I'm not into going and waiting around the studio another night. Not that I think like I'm too good for it, but just like, I don't feel good. Like, it doesn't feel like this is going to happen. Like, yo, like, whatever. Like, we're going home in 2 days. Like, I'm not going to stress getting this done, because then it's just going to stress me out. And I'm going to be sitting here feeling like, yo, what time is it? Yo, what time is it? I'd rather just like enjoy the time that I'm here in Jamaica. And Kenny was like, yo, let's try to get this done, man. Like, let's really try to get this done. Like, Aidonia is dope. We like it, just like he just kind of had that vibe. And so then it came to the next day, I think, and it was like, all right, studio, 7:00. All right. So we go, and eventually, sooner or later, they show up. He shows up. Couldn't be cooler. Very chill. The Equinox studio is like a closet. It's tiny, tiny room. And he comes in with a crew. Diablo, now governor, at the time, Diablo, who is he's on the mix. He's on Bolt Action as Diablo. Yeah. He's on it as Diablo. A couple more people from that JOP crew. I think Lalo was one of them, might have been his brother. So he's got a little crew there. There's a little Equinox crew there. And part of the Equinox crew is Little Joe, Joe, Jah Over Evil. And so he was there in the studio with us, and Joe is on the mix also on, I think, the Big Pimpin' beat. I got my grades in the duffel bag. I got my grades in the crookus bag. And so he ended up on it as well. And so we met him through that. And so Aidonia, so again, kind of like I have all these different ideas for rhythms. Kenny has all these ideas for rhythms. Kenny and his boy had made a couple of original rhythms. One of them that sampled Aidonia going the helicopter thing and built it into a rhythm. And that was kind of like one of the percussive elements. And so we just sit down and start dropping stuff. Yo. And it's everybody's right on top of each other. The door to the booth is open. He's got a spliff in hand, and he'll just start DJing a few lines, and da 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 da. And he would ask somebody, yo, what's the thing with the so and so? And one of the guys that was with him would DJ like 2 lines to him, and then he'd have oh yeah, that song, okay, da 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 da, boom. And so we just start going and start recording stuff and recording and recording and recording and recording. And so again, like people who are this good at this, watching them DJ and just like record is really fascinating. Like it's really special to just sit there and watch. And we're just sitting there and listening, and he's just like wheeling off. And again, I don't think there was one rhythm or hip hop beat that we put on that he was like, nah, give me something else. Mm-hmm. And like, that's something that I rate incredibly highly in any DJ, any rapper, is like, they're like, yo, this is what I do. Give me anything. And when you see people do this in a dance or on a stage show, like, Beanie is someone who's like this. It's like, like any rhythm. You know, remember in the verses with him and Bounty, when Bounty played the little techno thing that was the African funeral procession that was like a big meme song where they dropped the casket. You remember that? It's this big meme song, and it's like this EDM thing. And so Bounty plays it, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant because it's a killing thing because it's from this funeral, and it's like the hottest meme of the time. Mm-hmm. And so Bounty is like, and this song, but it's just an instrumental. That's the whole meme. And Beanie's standing up in the camera, and he just starts bopping. He starts going, and then DJ's over it. And like there's a moment, you got to go back and watch this. You got to edit it into this video. Beanie starts DJing over it, and Bounty is in the background, and he looks up like in absolute utter disbelief that this dude is DJing on this rhythm. And then the two of them go back and forth on it, and it's just like, it's so amazing. So like an artist who will just go on any rhythm. And so we're in the studio with Aidonia, and again, like I said, he's everything that we put on, like dancehall rhythms, sick, Far East, sling ting, whatever you want to call it. And then we're throwing left field, we're throwing Big Pimpin', and it's like nothing. Like he's knocking them out of the park. And I'm like watching this guy DJ and take songs that I know from other stuff and really just like murder every beat and really like serious. It made me, I was like thankful that Kenny was like, nah, man, we gotta get this done. Like let's wait. And and so watching him do that, and then then we throw on like a Baltimore track, Samir's theme that's got the horns, bah, 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 and boom, wheels off like nothing on that. The Tupac beat, I don't even remember the name of the one that we used on there. I think it was Hail Mary, which is like, it was one of those. And again, like I knew I'm not like the hugest Tupac fan, but also like, again, in thinking of like the context of what we want this to sound like at the end, but also knowing that when it comes to Jamaica, Tupac is the Don. And that,
Sure.
and that, like, we had the idea that, like, all right, this is probably going to connect for him and draw out some kind of like serious business, which it did. And again, he just kept like wheeling off tunes, and we're kind of doing all of this different stuff. And now here, when we were putting together the ideas for Aidonia, it was like there's a lot of parallels to what we did with Kartel, but we also really were like, we don't want to just do the same thing that we did with Kartel.
Yeah.
Of wanting to like take steps forward in what we're doing and the collaboration with the artist. And I feel like one of the ways that we did that on this one is kind of like, I feel like the way the Aidonia mix was put together, excelled beyond the level of like the Kartel ones. Like we were pretty green in terms of like some of the technical stuff and like, so there was a lot more thought and time put into like interweaving the tracks and mixing them. And then we would, there were scratches like on All About the Benjamins, again, to kind of bring this hip hop element to it. When he's DJing over All About the Benjamins, we're cutting and scratching behind that and pulling it up and bringing it back. And I think the same thing with maybe Quiet Storm or like a couple of those other beats. So I was like, yo, here's another layer and another element that we can add into it that is uniquely us and coming from that. Not that no one ever cut and scratch, but like bringing that to a mixtape with a dancehall artist and trying to elevate it and do something that we didn't do before and make the whole thing, again, greater than the sum of its parts, but also unique to what we were doing with Aidonia at the time.
No, definitely that was another big classic mixtape. But at this time here, this is about 5 to 6 years after the Kartel. So then clearly you guys are more seasoned in what you're doing. Your thinking is more matured, everything. So then you're pouring everything that you learned from the earlier series into this project here, plus new elements.
Definitely. Yeah. 100%. And trying new stuff and just like also having more confidence just in that, like the way I described earlier, like sitting down in that studio room in Jamaica. Like at this point, I feel like you still don't feel comfortable, but like, okay, like we're supposed to be here. Where the way the link was made was like, yeah, let's come do something together. Mm-hmm. And Gavin and the Equinox guys couldn't have been more welcoming. They've always been like that. And to this day, you know what I mean? Like that's family. So like comfortable in a way where, it was easier to push creatively even further. Cause it wasn't just like, being shook to be in the studio, with the entourage.
No, listen, I get it 100%. All right. I'm going to jump forward again, and then we're going to come back after this. I want to jump forward to the Chronixx mixtape, the Roots and Chalice, because you guys did the dance hall, hardcore dance hall and all this, but now this is a totally different level of artists where it's now, this is real cultural and stuff. And this time the movement, the reggae revival movement was hot and all this. So then how did that whole situation come up with Chronixx now, the Roots and Chalice mixtape?
Well, I talked to Chronixx about the idea of doing a mixtape the first time that I met him when he came to New York. And this is in like, this was like behind curtain, Odd Ross days. This is
that's extremely early. That's basically beginning of Chronixx.
This is his first trip to New York as an artist. He had been in New York. His father lived in New York for a bunch of years, still does, but like, so this was his first trip as an artist. And his manager, Pierre Bost, great guy, great friend of mine, brought him by. We had Radio Lily at the time, which is an online radio station. It's a whole nother episode. And Pierre linked me and was like, yo, I would love to bring Chronixx by. And so he brought him by and we sat and did a really long kind of just run-on interview, kind of like we're doing now. And Radio Lily was a storefront studio. So there was windows on the front, windows on the side, people walking by could see, and we were open air in a little retail store. So people could walk in. We had a few people there, you know, came by, but again, people didn't really know Chronixx then. Like it was really like the tunes were Warrior, Behind Curtain, and Odd Ross.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just had this long conversation and had a great conversation. I got that poster right there. That Chronixx one is actually from the same Radio Lily, but it's from the second time he came, which was like it was a much bigger scene because he had blown up quite significantly since then. And kind of, you know, we got to talking probably after the interview. And I was like, look, you know what he had at the time? You know what he had at the time? They had just done the Start a Fire mixtape that Walshy and Major Lazer did.
Mm-hmm.
So that was out. That was the biggest thing that Chronixx had out, because Major Lazer was nowhere near as big as it is now, but Major Lazer was absolutely international. And like the Major Lazer channels had people tuned in to Chronixx from very, very early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, I was like, yo, like, obviously, like, this isn't the right time, but like, I would love to do a Chronixx Federation sound mix. Like, I was like, I feel like this is something that this is something that we do. And I feel like when the time is right, we can do something that's going to be very different than what you did with Major Lazer. I'm not trying to duplicate that. And, you know, and I also was like, look, that's giving you exposure that nothing that Federation could do would give you, because there's just a different level of attention and awareness on what Diplo is doing. And so I said, when the time is right, somewhere in the future, like, I would love to work on a mixtape with you. And he knew, you know, he knew Federation mixes. He definitely knew the Aidonia mix. And I think knew the Kartel mixes, but like someone his age would have been prime time, haven't heard the Aidonia mixes, the Aidonia mix. And so him and I just built, and then we built a great relationship and a friendship. And I've gone on tour with him, done shows, done a million different things. And, you know, before even working on the mixtape, and as I said, did this second appearance on Radio Lily with him. Yo, don't forget about the mixtape. Like, when you're ready. And also Chronixx really just moves. He's a very unique and special artist, but kind of in a creative way. He's one of those guys that moves when he wants to move. And
you have to tell me that twice, boss.
He's not going to sit down, and you can't force him to sit down and be creative in that respect. Not about like doing interviews or whatever, but like his creativity, he decides when and where, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so just built a relationship. I going on tour with them, and we do all kinds of things and link steadily. And in one conversation at one point, he goes, yo, I've been thinking about mixtape. I've been thinking about doing a mixtape. And I was like, wait, say no more. I was a little too excited. I was like, say no more. I was like, where, when? It's like, yo, okay. And then and then I'm talking to Barnes and I'm talking to Pierre, and we're trying to like coordinate, and a bunch of time goes by and it's not really the right time. And they was like, yeah, no, because we're working on this, we're working on that. I was like, all right. And then it kind of just dropped into place where they were like, all right, we're working on the album, but let's do the mixtape before that. Let's do the mixtape as the lead into the album, as a like intentional marketing plan and planning it, you know, the way I talked about with the hip hop guys. And so again, I jumped. I was very excited. I was like, look, like, say where, say when. And then we coordinated it, and they've got a little studio. He's got a little studio, you know, in the hills in Kingston. And I flew down. They put me up in an Airbnb right down the road, a walk from there. And wake up, call him, walk to the studio. And we sit down, and it's his home base. And Chronixx is like not only is he an amazing vocalist and musician and songwriter, but I don't know if you know this, like he's a proper engineer and producer too.
Yes. I think he started out creating beats and engineering and stuff like that before he actually became Chronixx as we know him.
Yeah. He may have, and not only doing that, but taking it very seriously, and like the craft of engineering and mixing and studio gear and knowing how to do that. So, you know, I have my laptop or whatever, and so we go set up in the studio, and he plugs in his computer. He was using a program called Studio One. I'm a Pro Tools guy. You know, a lot of people are using Acid and different stuff, whatever. Plugs in a computer, plugs in the mic. It's his own studio. It's like a mobile setup, but we're in a proper studio, but it's still using the mobile setup. And then we're using the speakers. And we just start playing rhythms again. Like me and Kenny put together a folder of rhythms of like our ideas of what a Chronixx mix should sound like. And I was like, well, it's got to have some heavy roots on it. I was like, but also we all know this by this time, like Chronixx is an incredible dancehall artist, just essence of dancehall, juggling type dancehall. So I was like, all right, I want to make sure we get some of these, like, you know, old school dancehall vibes on here. Cause he's really incredible at that. And the idea was also that we would feature a bunch of songs that they had that weren't planned to be on the album. So let's do something with some of this bank of songs that aren't going to be on the album. And then let's do this original stuff, and let's do this, that, and the other thing. And so start playing rhythms and playing rhythms and playing rhythms. And I had in the folder, I had Prison Oval Rock, Barrington. And I had put it in there. This was not an accident. This was very intentional, because Prison Oval Rock is the OG Spanish Town song. That's and my thought process at the beginning of that was, all right, let me see. I hope this triggers something in our current Spanish Town representative. It had been a minute since there was anyone like really like this repping Spanish Town. And so we put it on, and it's from, like, we all know it. So he's like rocking to it. And I was like, look, like, you know what the idea is here. I was like, I want a modern Spanish Town anthem for the mixtape. Like, this is it. And like, I'm so excited about it, you know, and he's like rocking and he's listening. And then, you know, usually I'm behind the desk and I'm punching in and I'm recording, but he's got his own setup and he does it his own thing. And he's standing up at the mic and just starts freestyling off what becomes Spanish Town Rockin'.
So that song was created because of the mixtape.
Absolutely 100% created for the mixtape, because, like, again, like wanting to intentionally put certain things and make certain points I want to tell a story on the mixtape. And so we already know that like Spanish Town is very important for Chronixx. And so I go, okay, well, here's this Spanish Town rhythm that I want to make sure we do something for Spanish Town, specifically tell that part of his story on the mixtape. So that was the whole idea. Like that was the whole idea for the mixtape. And so then he just starts freestyling it off and wheeling it off. And I'm not even engineering. I'm just sitting there listening to it like, wow, this is incredible. And again, we're doing it for a mixtape. So it's like, you know, that whole thing is, again, like it's the kind of the dance hall toasting freestyle. Like if you listen to it in that context, knowing that, like it makes a lot of sense. Like that's what it is. And I'm sitting directly in front of him. We're working on a Federation mixtape. I handed him the rhythm, you know, like 4 bars in, Seco Max Glazer and Federation, da 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 da. And it's like, so, but it's done in a way where it's like for a mixtape, but also like in an 80s DJ song that will be in there. You hear Supercat hail up Danny Dread because Danny Dread was probably sitting in the studio with them. And a million other instances of that. And it's just very much of that style to, you know, to big things up and then down in the end, he bigs up Kenny Mees. And then he's you know, Spanish Town under Royal Regime, the whole of Brooklyn under Royal Regime. The reason he says Brooklyn is because it's Federation. It's Spanish Town. It's Brooklyn. We're making it for a mixtape. And that was where that came from. And it wasn't until after the mixtape was out and they're putting together all the songs for the album, and Spanish Town Rockin' had become such an anthem, like an anthem. That was a song from a mixtape. That was an anthem without question, bro. And became such an anthem that they decided to put it on the album. And even for the mixtape, but this is how ill of a musician Chronixx is, that even for the mixtape, he added music to the rhythm. The whole thing is, I have it in my computer right now, the instrumental, the version of Prison Oval Rock. And it's even off of vinyl. So there's a little bit of that like vinyl texture in it. But for the mixtape, so this is the other thing, because he recorded everything, he mixed the songs. I'm used to mixing them the way I do. He mixed everything and would send it to me. And so when he sent that back, he went back in and did all of these harmonies. And there's a very gentle guitar piece added in. And there may be even a little bit more instrumentation in it. And that was how he sent it back to me for the mixtape. So the way it is on the album is the version that we made for the mixtape. But to go back to the thing that I said about like wanting to make things with longevity, you know, like that's always been our mentality as Federation. And then here comes Chronixx going in after we even voiced the thing, mixing it himself and going, hold on, I want to put some guitar on this, and calling in his guitar player to do it with something that we were only making. And again, that sounds wrong because it's never only a mixtape for me, but something that we were making for a mixtape, not making for an album.
Which wasn't supposed to be the album professionally polished, this is what I present to the world type of thing.
Right. But to go back to the other stuff we talked about, the mixtapes, I'm making any mixtape that I do like I want it to last forever, like a Bob Marley album. That's how much time and effort I'm putting into it. And then here comes Chronixx, and this is like a new level of collaboration that we had never even experienced before, of like he's adding music to it. And then that's how so there's 2 songs from the mixtape. Spanish Town Rockin' and Majesty. Majesty was made for the mixtape. That rhythm is a Studio One. That's it's a remake of a Motown, but it's Otis Gale, I'll Be There For You. I think it's Al Green is the original I'll Be There For You. That version, the music, is a Studio One version of I'll Be There For You, sung by Otis Gale. And so we used that. And so when I played that, he started singing things, and he started singing that, and I was like, oh, that's wicked. He was like, yeah, he's like, that's a song I already have recorded. He already had it on an original beat, and we did it for the mixtape. And then again, same thing. He decided he wanted to use that version for the album.
That's wild, bro. It's wild to think that you're just thinking of, okay, yeah, let's just fool around with stuff. And the artist was so impressed with the idea that you presented that this now became a song outside of the mixtape world. These are stuff that you could buy on Spotify and these type of stuff here. That, just to think of collaborations that could do stuff like that's why I like to have these conversations.
No, I mean, totally. I don't even like to think, I don't even think of it as in that he was impressed by it. I just think that like, it was like a real collaboration. Like we put our minds together and came up with something, better than what we started with, and something that's able to have, look, like in terms of me, like again, like a fan, like I say this as a fan, Spanish Town Rockin' is going to play until we blow up the earth.
Until Spanish Town no longer exists.
Yeah, until we're gone, because it's that. Like it's just one of those songs like that. That's a piece of music that will live on as long as there's music and people have ears to listen to it. Spanish Town Rockin' will live on. So as a fan, I just enjoy it as an incredible thing. But to be able to like tell you the story of it and know that Federation had a part in contributing to the existence of that is super wild to me. And then the wildest level is that he says my name in it. Bro, every time I hear it play, I smile. And I think
so hold on, Eric's. Hold on. So in the official one that's out, your name is in the official one too, bro?
Yeah, absolutely. In the official one. Nothing changed from the mixtape. Nothing changed from the mixtape.
That's crazy, bro.
And so I can't believe it. Like the same way I'm like, I've gotten to do all of this really cool, incredible stuff and get to be a part of stuff, but I'm like, I can't believe it. And I play it all the time, so I hear it, but like I'll just be somewhere and I'll hear it and I'll be like, like life is crazy.
Beyond, boss, beyond.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's one of those things like, how lyrics to songs, like a lot of times people don't even like, they know the melody and they make the sounds, but you might not go, oh, what are these words? Yeah. So like I watch people somewhere, like people like nothing to do with me, just like sing along to it. Yeah. And I'm like, that's so crazy. Like, it's not even just my name. It's just some words and some sounds that's a part of this song that are ingrained in people's like minds
and their psyche forever, bro.
It's crazy. It's crazy. We just sat and it started with us being like, if I could get Chronixx to sing something over Prison Oval Rock for this mixtape, that would be super cool. Like that being the level to where to what it becomes and exists is, and it's why every day, no matter what, I'm just like a fan of music. Thankful for the opportunity to be involved in it, and why like I take it so super seriously to represent the music properly.
Mm-hmm. For
You know
sure.
what I mean?
Listen, that's why I told you just now, I stopped the conversation and said, listen, you know what? Let's do mixtapes, because some of your mixtapes are so super legendary that I really wanted the insights, and just like the Chronixx, crazy insight. This now is another one of my favorite mixtapes that you guys put out, which was the Kabaka Pyramid, Immuclate. Listen, I was watching a video, I think it was this morning or last night, and the rhythm for Immuclate Federation dubplate came on. Then you heard like piece of the metric start. Then you heard it go into corduroy. But then it started out with the PG rhythm. I said, yo, this is freaking crazy. And then in it, these rhythms came back. It's like, how did you guys come up with that concept for one, and then even to link with Kabaka Pyramid to put out that mixtape there?
Well, bro, first of all, that what you just said shows like the levels of reggae and dancehall that you are on. Because to pick apart the pieces and by name the rhythms that are on that are used for that particular dubplate. So big up Kenny Mees, because I'll tell you that particular rhythm constructed that way is something that Kenny did, and I had done a little bit before that. There's another like similar to that, but all different rhythms, crazy rhythm mega mix that had like Bruck Out, Showtime, Fed Up, Hydro, and a bunch of things where it was like that was the Mad Rock, and where it was just like all of the elements, you know, like drum fills from one, another thing kind of just moving in and out. It was something that we had used for a bunch of remixes. And then not too long after that, Kenny sat down and built the rhythm that you're talking about, which we call it mix up time. The first one I did, the one I did, I called Bruck Up Mega Mix, because it was kind of based off of Bruck Out. And then Kenny called this one Mix Up Time. And it was something we used here and there to voice dubs on. And I think it might have been used on the Aidonia mix too.
From then?
Yeah, we might have to go back to the files and confirm that. But we used it for a bunch of stuff, and like in jugglings, and just like loved it. I might throw that on for someone to DJ to live, because it always caught people off guard, because, you know, like DJ ears, like they got the tempo, but then, you know, their familiar elements are coming in and out, and it'll kind of always get people hyped. And so Kenny had built that one. We had been using it, and, you know, when it came time to sit down with Kabaka and we sat down to do this mix, we wanted to kind of like, you know, again, the same way I kind of described with Chronixx and with Aidonia, a little bit more like with the vibe with Chronixx, of like not take him out of his element, because Kabaka is also a dance hall master, is a DJ's DJ.
100%. Rapper too?
But yeah, exactly. Rapper too. Highlight that part of him as an artist. The same way with Chronixx, to like highlight it, because people were very much, you know, Chronixx we went into Roots and Chalice off of Dread and Terrible. So it wasn't dancehall Chronixx, it was Roots Chronixx. And Kabaka had been very much moving on, like he could still do all the other stuff, and there was other stuff, but like the main channel of what he was doing was reggae. And obviously we wanted to keep that, but knowing Kabaka for a long time and knowing about all of just his versatility, we really wanted to make sure to include something like that, where he's DJing on some dance hall and some hip hop, and just totally different vibe than the reggae stuff. And I put that on, and he was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, of course. Like, this is, you know, and Kabaka can be more more finicky and more picky when it came to beats and music and stuff like that. And like, just to jump back to the beginning of that project, it was more based on, again, a little bit of what I said about Chronixx, but way more in this case based on him and his team, Bebel Rock. We have a body of work that's not going to be on the album. We're working on the album with Damian Marley. The album is not going to be out at least for another year. We want to do something to keep energy. And again, it was a very thought out. They're an incredible team, and they're very thoughtful. And so is Kabaka as well. He's a full part of it. Like these are guys that they're like, they hold their regular meetings and go through the business. And so the mix became, when it came to be, was as a part of this plan leading up to The Calling, what became The Calling, and winning a Grammy, which is all incredible. And so I had talked to Kabaka and I had talked about doing mixes. It was like, yo, this is like, again, we have a long time link with Kabaka from, it's not his first song, but his first song that people really knew him as a dancehall guy, King Kabaka, that had the Dawn Penn drums chopped up, and that had this hip hop element in it. It had the cutting up in the chorus. And to tie this all together, that was produced by Equinox.
Okay.
And so that record had a hip hop sensibility, and it was when I heard it, to me, it was a guy DJing in this is straight dance hall, but also somehow totally raised on hip hop. You know what I mean? Like what he was doing in all of the things. So it was just like, that was a record that blew my mind, that I fell in love with. And Alric and Boyd, who are part of Federation, I was like, yo, like, and they were like, Kabaka? They were like, yeah, like, we know Kabaka since he was a rapper 10 years ago. They used to play Kabaka rap songs on their radio show on the Fat Block on Fame FM. And I was like, what? And so he was like, yeah, I'll go link him. And so like 2 days later, boom, 3-4 Kabaka dubs. And I was like, yo, this is incredible. Before I had ever even met him. And so again, just to the building of the link. And so that was years before. And so we had talked, many years later about doing mixes, and, funny enough, in the cycle of things and the cycle of people who, do this and who love it, Kabaka mixtape, While She Fire Major Lazer.
Yes, guy.
Which I love. I don't remember the name of it, but like that was dope. Like I love, like that's all family. And but it's funny because then we're again in the same thing of like, and again it did so much for Kabaka, and that mixtape has one of the most incredible songs in the universe, one of the most incredible pieces of Chronixx vocal in the universe. I don't remember the name of it. It's the two of them going back to back. And it never came out as a real song.
It never came out.
Never came out as a real song. And that also has Kabaka versus Pyramid over
yes.
The Biggie record, where Biggie is like rapping back and forth with somebody, but they're both him. And Kabaka does
the Accurate mixtape. That's what that mixtape was called.
Accurate, yes. And so Kabaka does Kabaka versus Pyramid, which is Kabaka, the reggae artist, the dancehall artist, versus Pyramid. One of his original rap name was Ronnie P.
Okay.
Ronnie Pyramid. And so like they did that on that mixtape. So they did some mind-blowing things on that mixtape. While she had him rap over a brand Nubian beat, I think like All for One or something, like crazy, 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 crazy. Like I love it. And so then we're talking about doing it. So like then we get to enough years later, and Kabaka and I are talking about doing a mix. And it was like, yeah, and the things fell into place, and the time was right. And I said to him, I was like, look, like obviously, like we want to make sure this is really different than what you guys did. And my intention has always been to do something different than what you and Walshy did. I said, because one, that's what we do as Federation, but also like I think it benefits you as an artist the most. And so we had this whole bank of work that of music that they wanted to kind of like rinse out before doing the album stuff. And so we kind of started from that place with a lot of music, and they sent me a ton of music. And it was also really interesting because it was, again, like a new level of collaboration, because we were on Zoom meetings like every week, like with his team, like Dwayne, Abby, and Kabaka, like going over track lists, going over songs, going over ideas. We're coming up with a million different names. And it's like, I was like, well, look, like I would have called it Accurate, but like you guys used that on the last one. And we're going through, but we're having like, we're having full on like team meetings. And I finally was just like, I was like, you know what? I was like, honestly, this should just be called Immuclate. Because back, like it all ties in back to Kartel and up to the time. And like they had already named their first mix Accurate. When you hear Accurate, Immuclate, that's Kabaka. Like so the name is like this with Kabaka Pyramid. If you know Kabaka Pyramid, I said, but also the word Immuclate is correct. You know what I'm saying? In like, now we're gonna make the Immuclate like clean. Like when you talk about like in a dance hall way, like clean, all the way clean. Something, not that anyone can make anything perfect, but like that's the idea. Like
For
okay,
sure.
And that he's this immaculate lyricist. And again, that's where that comes from. He is accurate and immaculate. So we were like, yo, and it all kind of locked in because we were kind of we didn't have a good name locked in. And so we came to that and we were like, all right. And then things really started locking in. And another element that I really wanted to add to that, again, to do something different was instead of having it all be like him talking as interludes, I was like, I want to find audio clips that can do that same sound man thing that I was talking about earlier of like, yo, da 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 da, and the talk that introduces the record. So the record hits even harder. I was like, and we talked about that a couple times in this conversation and doing that in different ways. And so with Kabaka, I was like, I want to do that by using snippets from other things, unrelated things, like not necessarily like dance hall things, as it were. And I just started searching so I started from the place of like, before we even had all the songs, just like knowing Kabaka and searching, like, I started downloading Haile Selassie speeches, started downloading Marcus Garvey speeches. I started downloading Malcolm X, Martin Luther King speeches. Kabaka was talking to me about Peter Tosh being one of his favorite artists. And I started looking through Peter Tosh things. And so I had this whole bank of those. And as we started putting the mix together, I started hearing how certain things that I found could do what I wanted them to do. And I think it's the Kabaka song Believe. Believe in I myself. I have to believe in I myself. And so like I already have this folder. And so then they send me that, and it's like in the intro before he even starts DJing and singing is like Garvey teach me, without belief in self, you're twice defeated. Like that classic line, like, if you don't believe in yourself, you're twice defeated already.
In the race of life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, I'm like, I have Garvey snippets in the thing. We're going to use Garvey talking. And it's not him saying that. Mm-hmm. We're going to use Garvey talking to lead into this. Cause I'm like, before I even made the connection of him saying Garvey teach me, I'm like, okay, believe in myself. I'm like, all right, this is that bank of things. This is not Peter Tosh. Like I already know that's Garvey talks. And so, but then like with the words actually connected, and then there's all this other stuff as we're putting the mix together, and there's all these things that we have, and he sent me some things and I had some things that we were like, here's how we can tie this together, weave it into a story. And then, going back to the name, I was like, okay, so normally what do you do for a mixtape? You do a drop. We're going to do a drop. Most of the mixtapes start with drops. Cartel mixes all start with drops. Aidonia starts with a drop because I had to have him do it afterwards because we didn't have it. Chronixx, he does like a little 4-line, 5-line freestyle that we do a cappella with sound effects is the first thing. So you get Federation, the name of the mix, whatever, this kind of like checklist that I have to do. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right, how can we again try to do something different? And so then I just start going on YouTube, searching immaculate definition. And there's all these weird videos of people like describing immaculate things or whatever. Just, it's like you go into these weird corners of YouTube and whatever. Mm-hmm. And I pulled a bunch of them, and then I'm going through, and it's like if you listen to it, like you don't even need to see this video. That's the whitest voice you could ever find. Like that guy's name is probably Chad. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just him. It's him giving this perfectly enunciated description of what immaculate means. He even says in it, like, he's giving examples like a piece of music can be immaculate, played perfectly. Da 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 da. And I was just like, yo. And it's just like putting together this, and I didn't get to this point yet, but this is all of these mixes. What it's like, it's putting together a puzzle.
1,000%, boss. 1,000%.
It's like putting together a puzzle, but you're also making the pieces as you go along. They're not dumped out in front of you. Like you're creating them and putting the puzzle together. And so like,
well, you're going in with that mindset, knowing that this is a puzzle and there's going to be pieces that I have to invent as we go along.
There's a question. I needed to give it an answer. There's a problem that needs to be solved. And this is what we're trying to get to at the end of it. And then like right out. And then so I was like, all right, this is this like totally like kind of like opposite of reggae sounding thing. And then I was going through all these Peter Tosh clips. And like, I didn't have anything to use Tosh in that worked anywhere else. That was like the right anything. And then there's just like I can't even try to imitate it, but like Tosh has the illest voice. And just like when he talks, it's serious. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know if maybe he's probably has, but I feel like he's never told a joke. You know what I mean? Or like skin teeth. Like it's so dread and terrible. And there was just this one line where he goes, "This music, reggae music, is the king's music." And so that was what led from this immaculate talk into like that was how we ended the intro. And I just like I felt like at that point I felt like the puzzle had come together. You know what I mean? So like being able to sit, like so a bunch of that, most of that was, if not all of it, was done during the pandemic. We may have started the talks about it prior, and maybe a few works, but like the finishing things for that mix were recorded in the pandemic right here where I'm sitting. Like that wall behind you is where we recorded the freestyle, the dub that you asked me about, him DJing over Above the Clouds, which is the Gangstar beat, and there's two dubs on Real Rock. There's a tune he does called Reggae Music, which is just basically like a tribute to reggae. And then we did the version of he had redone Michigan and Smiley's Nice Up the Dance. For a compilation. So all of that we recorded sitting right here. And my photographer Show Shots came. It was me, Kabaka, and Show Shots, just like taking pictures and filming video. And so we kind of sealed up the recordings for it. And then I right here, and then I put the rest of it together. And we did a lot of back and forth. It was an interesting and different process from anything I had done with anybody else. And, then that hit the road. And it was, and it turned out to be as they wanted it to be, the step leading up to, very specifically leading up, because they took a lot of those unreleased songs, then they released them on DSPs. So they're on the Spotify's and the Apple Musics, but they exist as a part of the mix. So they kind of rinsed out all of that music while they were working on The Calling with Gong. And then, The Calling comes out. The rest is history, in terms of Kabaka and winning the Grammy. So again, just like as a fan, like having insight into that process, and getting to work with him on that, the step leading right up to that, was great experience, man. Incredible.
No, definitely. These stories about how things just happened. Oh, it was just a conversation. Oh, I knew this person just led to this, led to that. That's why I like to have these conversations. Again, I repeated this several times, but I'll continue to say it because, again, we only get the end product. We only see when it gets the Grammy. We only see when the song comes up, but you don't know how this song even took shape in the first place. And that's why I like to talk about it. So talking about taking shape now, okay? We talked about most of mixtapes because there's a couple ones, but I want to end this conversation like this now. Dubplates. I know when it comes to Federation has authentic, real Rihanna dubs, okay? First of all, when you brought the idea to Rihanna to say, hey, let's do a dubplate, did she know what it was? Did you have to coach her into it? What was that process like to get Rihanna to even consider to record a dubplate in the first place?
So Rihanna is born and raised in Barbados. Everybody knows this. She speaks of it proudly to this day. I think it's one of the many awesome things about her, is she is that Caribbean girl, and she's repped that very hard in the world, in every aspect. And so as a teenager and young adult who grows up in any Caribbean island, like, she also knows the words to every Sizzla song. You know what I'm saying? And every Buju, and that's what we would ride around and listen to, before there was even a tour bus in a white 15 passenger van. So in terms of understanding what dubplates are, that's definitely a part of her culture and her upbringing before I even got involved in anything with her musically. That's just, I think, a part of her, the same way I said, like, I'm not born into this. Like, I come into this and I've learned about it. She's born into it, in that respect. And, the way it came about was, of course, I find myself lucky enough to be on tour with Rihanna. It's an obvious thought. And then, and we became pretty good friends from a pretty early point, because it was such a small operation, as I explained in part one. And there wasn't really separation between artist and team. It was just us, like, a few people. And so, at whatever point I got, comfortable enough with her, was like, oh man, like, at some point, at some point, I, would love to get, got to voice a couple of dubs or whatever. She's always like, yeah, of course, whatever. Yeah, of course. No problem. But, all of that time that I was with, like, I described this before, like, she was incredibly hardworking and there was a lot of work to do. And mind you, like, work that didn't even have anything to do with me was she put out an album every year for like 5 years. The first 2 albums were less than a year apart. So like that, and I never had anything to do with that studio work. So between all the stuff that I talked about and what we're doing, she's also making these albums. And so, things are going, Federation team is like, yo, Max, like, bro, what's up with these Rihanna dubs? Like, you're supposed to have this by now. All of my people that play sound is like, yo, come on, man. Like, yo, what's up with the Rihanna? Yo, we want to voice some Rihanna dubs. I'm like, yo, I don't have any yet. I don't have any. Yo, hold tight. We're working on it. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny. It's really funny the way it finally came about was, before they had the song together, we just ended up on one of these like radio station shows in California, and Sean Paul was performing on the same show we were, and I introduced her to Sean. We went specifically to his. Sean was way bigger than she was at the time, and just went. And it was Jig Zag from Copper Shot, Copper Sean, Fahrenheit, Urchin, their whole team, same team as it ever was. So, kind of just like introduced everybody, kicked it, whatever. Then without me, she ended up going to Jamaica. They went by Don Corleone, and that was when they recorded the combination, Break It Off, which ended up, I think, on both of their albums. So that was like a big deal. And so then following that, Break It Off was out, and we had moved up. We were on a tour bus and whatever. And then I was like, yo, we gotta record these tunes. And I was talking, and Sean had reached out to her and was like, yo, and Sean was like, yo, I need you to voice your parts of the combination we did for Copper Shot. That's my sounds, my brother. That's yo. So my link was good and we would have gotten it done, but really the thing that got it to happen when it happened was Sean was like, yo, I need your parts of the dub for Copper Shot. So it was like artist to artist. And we were on tour. And so throughout the tour, this is going on and that conversation is happening. I got my Pro Tools set up with me. We're living on the tour bus. We're sleeping on the tour bus. And she's like, no, I know. We'll get it done. Sean said, da, 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 da. And so I'm like, all right. So I'm like, while we're waiting, I'm on the tour bus. in my bunk. Bunk is like a little coffin. I got my yellow notepad. And so I started writing it out. I started writing out her parts because she knows what dubs are. She's never voiced one. And also that's like a different skill of like the ability to flip your own song into like into dubplate lyrics. So I started writing it out. I started writing her parts out. And just kind of like bouncing it back and forth. And so I think I did that for Break It Off, and you know, because Sean knows what to do. Like we don't need to do the Sean parts. And so I was like, all right, I know we'll be able to do Break It Off. And so mind you, this was before Umbrella. Umbrella wasn't out. And I was like, all right, I want to try to get one more. I was like, and it was interesting because at the time, the other big one, I didn't go for Ponder Replay. I was hoping to get more after this, but like, I was like, look, if I can get a second one right now, I want to do something like, I want to do the ballad, which was Unfaithful, which was a big tune. Big, not in terms of where she is now, but Unfaithful. And that was just like a straight piano and strings ballad. So mind you, I had all the performance tracks, obviously. And so I also wrote out Unfaithful, start to finish, dubplate version. And we get to like the last piece of the tour, and like it's after the last show, and we got like another day or two on the tour bus to get home or whatever we're doing. And I was like, we got to get these done. I was like, yo, Sean's calling me. We got to get these done before we get off before this run ends. Cause then everybody's going different ways for a while or whatever. And she was like, yeah. She's like, all right. So then we go. So the back of the bus had so there was like 8 bunks or whatever, 12 bunks, front lounge. And then the back was her room, but it wasn't a baller bus. It wasn't like a Khaled bus. It was a tour bus. But that one had like a fold out couch and the beds or whatever. It was like two twin beds. And so that was like her and her best friend, one of the girls from Barbados, would always be back there. And I was like, look, she was like, all right. So it's like in the back of the tour bus while the bus is on the road, I got my Pro Tools set up. I set everything up, handheld mic, Shure SM58. No stand, no nothing. And I got my notes. I got a notepad. And I was like, yo. And so we start, and it was funny. Like, it was super funny. Like, I have a couple of pictures of this. I don't have any video of it, unfortunately. But I have a couple of pictures of it's like her with a hoodie up, handheld microphone in her hand, and a notepad. It's like some real original dub plate hotel room tour bus type business. And so we went through them. And so, and it was interesting because I had never recorded her for anything. But again, like at this point, like, you know, on some dub plate I'm like, all right, hold on, do that line again. Here, you got to say it like this, say the name like this, same way. So we go through and we do a Copper Shop version of Break It Off. And then we do the Federation version of Break It Off. And I was like, look, I did it. I was like, I wrote it out for Unfaithful too. And so she reads it through and she's like, oh, okay. And so we go through it. And so when we go through it, like couple lines at a time, and voiced Unfaithful. And then I did probably like a drop for Federation, probably a drop for Copper Shot, and then a drop for, I think the sound at the time was Island Superior out of Brooklyn, but it was my boy Dew. His name was Mountain Dew. He plays Tech Nine now. Plays Tech Nine out of North Carolina. Dew. That was my family. So he had asked me for it. So I was like, look, when I can get it. So I don't know if anybody else did. He got a drop and it was for his sound at the time. He had played Island Superior, played another sound, did his own thing for a while, and then has been on Tech Nine for a long time. And so those from that era are absolutely 100% real. And I've posted here and there, and people will be like, that's a splice, that's a whatever. And I'm like, no, here's a picture of me voice. Like, I don't like, again, I'm not in Sound Clash world, but like anyone is welcome to have that argument with me. Cause like, bro, I sat there and voiced them myself. I wrote them on a piece of paper. I probably still have the piece of paper somewhere. Like, even if I didn't have a picture of them voicing, like, you could argue with me all day. Like, if I did something, I know that I did it.
But the chances of somebody having an authentic, real Rihanna dubplate would be, even, let's say, argument is, well, not even that. That doesn't make sense either. Because I was going to say that Copper Shot song was fake, but that wouldn't make sense because of the affiliation with Sean Paul. So if you just look at it from a high level, it makes sense.
No, but that's what I'm saying. It's silly. Like it totally makes sense. And worst of all, like, again, I'm not clashing. And worst of all, I could never play a fake dub of someone that I like, a friend, someone that I spent years working with. You know what I mean? Like, that's just absurd. And so like, so people would say stuff about him all the time. And again, I'm not clashing with them. So it's like, it's whatever. You can say whatever you want. But also, like, I sat there and I recorded them. So, and so, you know, like years later, I believe Major Lazer has one. I think you would have to, you might have to dig in Sound Clash world a little more. That's the only other, and I'm talking about, I mean, look, this is like Unfaithful and Break It Off are what, like 12 years ago at this point, right? If not more, maybe. Yeah, they're probably more than that. They're probably like 15 years old or whatever. So there's a ton of time in between now and then. I don't think maybe there are a few. I think there's a Major Lazer one, you know, and then, you know, in the Red Bull Culture Clash, Rodigan and Chasing Status played we found love in a hopeless place. But I don't think they ever say that it's Rihanna. I don't know.
One of those where you'll play it, people hear it, and you just leave it up to their interpretation for whatever they think it is.
Yeah, that's what I remember thinking when I heard that. Again, I would have to go back and listen, but I don't remember them ever saying it was her, and I don't remember the person singing saying it's her.
It's one of those real technical thing. I didn't say it was, but if you think it is
in the tune. So I know there was a whole slew of like fake Umbrella one, you know, people singing over Umbrella. That was really when it started, of doing it. But yeah, no, I mean, that's two things that are, you know, absolutely, treasured in the Federation dub box. I rarely play them, but also just the experience, you know, for me, a lot of the memory and the experience of literally getting to sit there on a tour bus with Rihanna and voice dub plates as, you know, as a sound man, as someone who plays reggae, as someone who's a DJ. You know, I think that's very cool. The same way to be there when Chronixx built Spanish Town Rockin' and we collaborated on it. You know, it's one of those things that whether you believe it's real or not, that doesn't matter to me. Like you know, it's a part of it. It's a big part of the enjoyment that I get from the opportunities that I've had, that I've been given as a result of music in general and dancehall and reggae and Caribbean music specifically.
For sure. Max, listen to me. Again, I knew the conversation was going to be bad, but again, I didn't know it was going to be this crazy again, to get in depth behind the scenes of stuff that, again, as I told you earlier, I'm pretty sure there's somebody somewhere listening to the first Kartel mix right now off a YouTube CD whatsoever. But it's for you to all bring the viewers and the listeners inside of what was really happening behind the scenes, how it really happened, how you felt, what you thought, and how it really played out. Those are the stories that matter the most.
I appreciate it, man. Yo, I appreciate the many hours of your time, and to the people who have tuned into part one. Like I said, the same way with all of this music stuff. I really I don't take it for granted, man. I appreciate anyone who's tuned in and heard a piece of the story, and even just listen to a Vybz Kartel mix or a Kabaka mix or a Chronixx mix or Aidonia or any of this stuff. Because that's really like the ultimate reward in doing it. Is it's like I love talking about it and it's great to be recognized for it, but ultimately, like I said, with Spanish Town Rockin', like my hope and belief is that a lot of these things are going to be here long after we're dust, long gone, and they'll exist for people to enjoy.
For sure. Max, leave some contact info where they could check you out on social media. Anybody you want to pick up, anything you want to say, the floor is yours 100% before I get you out of here.
Yeah, man, big up the entire Federation Sound. Big up my founding partners, Kenny Mees and Cipha Sounds. That's really like the root and the foundation of all of it. Big up the current team. Big up Alric and Boyd out of Jamaica, DJ Mason, DJ Dangles out of Brooklyn. This year, 2024, we're celebrating 25 years of Federation Sound. So we've been dropping little things here and there, but there's going to be, more on the way. We have in New York, Sunday, July 7th, 2024, 7/7, when the two sevens clash. We have a Federation 25th anniversary show with Summer Stage, City of New York. It is a free show at the amphitheater in Coney Island. Federation Sound, Sister Nancy, Tonto Metro and Devante, and many more artists to be added to that lineup Sunday 7/7. So everybody come out and support the thing. It is absolutely free. It's early. It's 5 to 9. Get up for work Monday morning, no problem. And really just giving thanks for 25 years of music, getting to do this, the opportunity to do this, people listening, and you can find us everywhere. Twitter and Instagram at Federation Sound, Facebook.com/Federation Sound. I'm on Instagram, Twitter at Max Glazer. Super easy to find me. I'm pretty responsive on DMs on everything. But really, most of all, thank you for the time. Thank everybody for tuning in. If you made it this far to the end of it, I feel like I should buy you a drink or something. But that's why we're doing this 25th anniversary show. It's a big free give back. Want to invite everyone to come out and join us in New York and just celebrate. Big up the entire Federation Sound team and you, Muscle, the Entertainment Report podcast, Two Line Music Cut, and all the reggae and dancehall lovers worldwide.
Definitely, Max. Thank you again. It seems like you're going to be a recurring guest here and there and a couple more places because we still got so much. We haven't talked about who you went on tour with. We haven't talked about all your media work. We haven't talked about production. We haven't spoken about, man, you know what? Just know that there's a lot of stuff that we haven't spoken about yet. Just leave it at that.
We didn't talk about Red Bull Culture Clash. No, there's so much of it. But honestly, look, you tell me. You got the big Entertainment Report podcast. If people aren't sick of it somewhere down the line, I'm always happy to sit down and talk because I love this. As you can see, I will talk everyone to death about it. It's because I care about it and I love it. So if you feel like somewhere down the line there's a demand for more talk, I would love to sit down and talk about even more of it.
100%, because even interviews you've done, there's still so much. But I think this is a good overview of who you are, what you've done, until we connect again and put some more pieces of the puzzle together that we didn't know we were creating before when we started this conversation.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
You understand. Let me give you an outro and get you out of here, Max, all right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Muscle, and this has been another Two Line Music Hut's Entertainment Report podcast, and we are out. Bam. This podcast is brought to you by www.twolinemusichut.com.